now.
On them about Creek, and they do a pretty good job. They've like double checked it.
And we are live.
Good, okay.
It'll still be.
All right, everybody, welcome to the City of Wildwood Planning and Parks Committee meeting for Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. I get a motion for approval of the minutes for last month's meeting, October 1st.
Could we do a roll call, sir?
A roll call would be good.
Thank you.
We'll do a roll call.
Chair Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember Oblisky, Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember Crayons,
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Trottier.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Nice. All right, now we'll move into the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion for that? Councilmember Dodwell, did you make a motion? For Rockford. Second, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, motion.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and that takes us into public participation. Do we have anybody online?
If anyone currently using Zoom would like to participate, please use the raise hand feature and we will promote you to a panelist. No, sir.
Oh, okay, that takes us straight into action item of the planning matters. We have 4 items for consideration. The first being the basin retrofit study. Mr. Wagner is here and Director Bevich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, if you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself or Mr. Wagner come around, Todd Wagner. He is our consultant that's been working with a group of other consultants over the course of the last several years. Mr. Wagner was finally given an assignment that we thought was one of the critical projects for our watershed erosion task force recommendations, and that was the basin retrofits in the upper reaches and middle reaches of the Cox Creek watershed. As has been explained many times, those basins generally in the older subdivisions were done at an MSD standard that wouldn't pass muster today. But they're still functional and not doing what we would hope they would do in terms of the amounts of rainfall we're getting and the intensity and severity in some instances. Basin retrofits was a suggestion, along with, out of the USGS study, potentially adding new storage basins in the watershed as well. Fix the old and maybe do the new. Mr. Wagner, I'll take it from there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay, this is a fairly long and involved presentation that I am going to go through pretty quickly because I don't want to take too much of your time. But I will leave some time at the end for questions if you want to do a question at the end. But if you want to interject, just jump right in. It won't bother me a bit. That's a good thing about not really having a train of thought. You can't interrupt my train of thought, right? So, no, you go ahead, just yell out or raise your hand or whatever. If you have a question as we're going along, something's not clear, I want to be sure that you feel comfortable and you feel like you're understanding kind of what this is all about and what the point is behind this study and where you're headed from here. So yes, this is a retrofit study of a few basins. These basins, we've been looking at detention basins in Wildwood for a few years now. And we have pared these down to the ones that we felt like had the most opportunity for improvement. Sometimes if you're looking at something, the worse it is, the more room for improvement you have. So to some degree, that's kind of true. If a basin is already doing really well, there's not as much gap there for improvement. So that's kind of one of the criteria that we've looked at is how was the basin designed and how is it performing and what's the opportunity to improve that basin. I want to make clear, pointed at the computer.
Is it on? There it is.
Okay, if mine's not working, I'll just kind of signal your way. Okay, I want to get something straight. First of all, when we're talking about retrofitting basins, we have two types of basins. And so that you understand the terminology, we have what we call a wet basin, and that's a pond. You have a lot of ponds, a retention basin, a wet basin. We use those types of terms for something that is a pond, and that when it rains, it fills up and then it drains back down to what we call a permanent pool. Then we have dry basins, and those are those that just completely drain out, and normally they're dry and they have grass or whatever in the bottom of them. And so when we're looking at the top, we have a dry basin. So the light gray is what we call the design flood level. That is flood water. That's water that only goes in after a heavy rain, and then it drains out completely, usually within a few hours after a rainfall, and then you have a dry basin. All of that is what we call flood control water. The more we can store, the more effective we're going to reduce downstream flow rates and downstream flooding. When I have a wet basin, like most of the basins are that we're looking at today, you have a permanent pool, this dark area, and then this area here is the flood pool. And that is the area or the volume that we're trying to increase whenever we try to improve downstream flooding, when we try to store more water and release it slowly. So this is the range of elevations that we're trying to gain more, perhaps by excavating on the side of the pond over here to get more storage in this range. Now, when we talk about cleaning out a basin, in other words, some of the wet basins need to have sediment cleaned out of them. That's this area down at the bottom where you might have accumulated sediment over time, and the pond has become more shallow. Perhaps it has more algae problems, more sediment. It just looks murky, or just the quality of the water has degraded over time, particularly in the summer. You'll notice that. And so there's benefit to cleaning that out. But I want to be clear, when you clean out the bottom of a basin, the sediment, you are improving the water quality or the aesthetics of the lake, but you're not providing any benefit for flood control. The flood control volume is this gray area. And if that's the volume we want to increase to reduce flooding, this is just purely to improve the quality of the pond, or perhaps improve water quality downstream by reducing sediment or by reducing nutrients, or the algae growth would be less and so forth. So I just want to make that clear, that there's a distinction there in wet ponds between permanent pool and design flood level or design flood pool, and the purpose of this water and the purpose of that water is different. So when we're talking about that, keep that in mind. See if it's going to work now.
It did, well, too far.
And I go, there we go. So when we're looking at a retention pond sediment removal, this is just so you can visualize what it might look like. This is a small wet pond that was being cleaned out, and this is typically what you would see. Very fertile organic soils that has washed in over time, soft, unconsolidated soil. And so we're going to excavate that soft, mucky material and get it out of there. And then you are down to what we would call virgin soil. That is hopefully soil that's consolidated, original soil that will be more apt to not leak and so forth. But whenever you take off overburden like that, soil that's somewhere down below it is bedrock, and the potential for leaks and sinkholes. And you know as well as we do in Southwest Missouri about sinkholes and karst activity. You always have that risk. And so with the recommendations that you see in this, you will see excavate that soft, unconsolidated sediment material, and then put back a layer of bentonite clay over that to give you kind of an insurance policy against having a leakage problem that you could expose by doing this type of work. So it reduces that risk of potentially having a leaky pond when you're done. It's kind of giving us a seal of bentonite clay. So that I would recommend doing that as part of any of these sediment removal activities to hopefully make sure that we don't have any leaks when we get done.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, ma'am.
On the bentonite clay, does it expand when it's in the
It
water?
does, that's
So that it,
partially why it seals so well.
okay,
Kind of like if you've ever squirted the stuff to seal the cracks in your
yeah,
basement or whatever, and you squirt it in and it expands and fills those voids. Bentonite is really good at that. It has extremely expansive clay.
okay.
Yeah, good question, though. Good comment. Thank you. There we go. These are the basins we're looking at. West Glen Retention Pond, Copper Lakes Retention Ponds. There's two. The harbors of Lake Chesterfield, which is the retention pond upstream of the big lake. And then Town Center, which is the one right here nearby, the Southwest Detention Basin here, which is a dry basin. These three are wet basins. So here's the location. This is West Glen. This black line here is the outline of Cox Creek watershed, which drains to the north. And so it's West Glen. These are the three Town Center basins. Here's the one on the southwest, the harbors of Lake Chesterfield, and there's the two at Copper Lakes. And so those were the ones that rose to the top as having the best opportunity for a retrofit. Too much text on a slide, right? But we'll talk about this real quickly. I want you to understand the things that we look at from an engineering design standpoint to vet and make sure that our designs are responsible. So we're reducing the rate of water discharge. That's the goal, because ultimately we're trying to reduce erosion downstream, and the more water you have, generally the more bank erosion you're going to have. So reduce that flow, hold it, meter it out at a slower rate. Reduce the frequency and duration of erosion causing flow rates. So generally there's a range of flow that really beats on your channel walls downstream, those where you see erosion occurring. So we try to reduce how often that occurs and how long it occurs on those downstream channels. So that's kind of the goal of designing volume and release rates from these ponds. We want to increase flood storage. We want to restrict the outlet openings. We want to maintain the 100-year inundation on common areas, and that is we don't want to increase in the big floods. In a 100-year flood, we don't want it to back up and cause more flooding than it would have before. So we have to check that 100-year flood and make sure we're not going to worsen flooding on anyone in an extreme event like that. Obtain easements if necessary, and there might be a case where you might inundate a little bit of private property. So that would be a case where we would want to obtain a detention easement. Add emergency overflow to make sure we don't cause an overflow that could wash out a berm or something of that nature. Maintain a freeboard, that is the space between the highest water surface elevation and the top of a berm. You don't want to fill that all the way to the top because you have no safety factor there at all. If you have any settling in your berm, you overtop that berm, you don't want to wash it out. So that's a little bit of a safety factor. Check our future conditions. AKA what's going on right here next door. Is there going to be any more development? So we want to look at that. Prevent bank erosion due to changes in water surface. Pond maintenance opportunities. Do we have an opportunity to reduce the pond maintenance or improve aesthetics on these ponds? Pond dredging has been very, understand there's a lot of interest in that to improve the quality of the pond. So those are a lot of different criteria that we're looking at. Yes, sir.
Item number 7, where you mentioned adding overflow capacity as needed to some of the ponds. So are there specific ponds where you foresee that being necessary, or is it just sort of a general comment?
Yeah, I'm gonna go real quickly. I'm gonna look at each pond and what our recommended changes are. And they actually, partly what we're doing as we try to increase that volume of flood storage, you might push the water surface a little higher for some of the smaller storms. So then we have to install a little bit of overflow spillway capacity so that large storm has a way to get out and it doesn't go up. You're increasing a smaller storm elevation, but you don't want your really big 100-year storm to get any higher. And so sometimes we do that, we control that by installing an extra spillway at the top end to make sure that that doesn't flood anybody that didn't get flooded.
And I'm sure it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Obviously, if you're going to add an overflow capacity on some of these or a spillway, you have plans for where the water is going to go once it goes through the spillway.
Yes.
Okay.
And keep in mind, the actual flow isn't any more, but the water surface elevation is higher. And so we're trying to control water surface elevation, but also increase the volume so that the downstream flow doesn't get more. It's at water surface elevation. And so we just want to make sure that we don't cause any kind of a problem with overtopping that we didn't have before. Okay, so let's look at these real quick. West Glen is kind of what we call the west branch of Cox Creek. Our blue lines over there kind of indicate that. And so West Glen, it really only collects water from an area just to the northwest there. And if you get your bearings, this is 109 and 100. So we kind of see it's in the northeast of that area. So we have everything draining in this direction. But West Glen only collects a small area in this picture. It's just this area right up here. So it is what we would call an incremental improvement. We can reduce flows a lot, but it's only collecting water from a small area as compared to the overall west branch of Cox Creek. So it's very effective at doing what it does, but it is a small area and a small incremental improvement within the overall watershed. So this is the basin. This is our survey that kind of shows you what it looks like with the spillway here at the bottom end, and there's a creek right here that way. It's draining into here.
So are you saying that that small pond is going to stop the erosion in Cox Creek?
Well, that's what I was saying. It's an
That's pretty
incremental, it's an incremental improvement. So the big picture is when we get to the very end, I'm recommending a number of things be done. Because just any one thing is not going to fix your Cox Creek problem. Unless you build another Lake Chesterfield or something of that magnitude. But what we're looking at are incremental improvements, looking at what's a dollar per incremental improvement that we see. So we kind of look at it that way. We'll look at that. And this one is good in that respect, but it's not large enough to fix the problem on its own.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. These are all parts of a large puzzle of trying to heal this watershed and bring its runoff, characteristics back to more like pre-development conditions. That's basically what we're trying to do. This is the outlet structure, and we would make some modifications to this to make this higher, to restrict this low flow more. And so basically this pond has a lot of extra volume. So we're going to take advantage of that volume. Right now it's not being used. It never fills up. It will never fill with the outlet structure that it has on it. So we're going to restrict it more and push that water surface to the top. A lot of the top of the berm is uneven and has sags in it. So we would repair the top of the berm, restrict the outlet. The creek has a large slab of concrete in it that has erosion problems. Would recommend fixing that. There's the raise the top of the level berm. Doing some armoring around the banks where you have a lot of brush and erosion on the banks of the lake. Some erosion there and sediment below the incoming pipe would be cleaned up. This is kind of the big slab of concrete that I showed you there where there's erosion. This is the type of more natural corrective action that you would do there, is what we call a boulder drop structure or something of that nature that makes the creek function more like a natural creek instead of having the potential for erosion that could even threaten the outlet structure. A preliminary plan of what it would look like with the rock around the perimeter and some modifications here in the creek. Here's an overflow spillway that would be added to make sure that we don't overtop, just kind of as a safety factor. And then all along this berm, that would be leveled up. Maybe a foot added in places to make sure that berm is nice and level right at the elevation that we want it to be. So this is the first pond, an example of what.
So do you think you'll need easements for that pond?
On this one, because we are raising the water surface, it touches the corner of this lot. So we have a small triangular easement there that would need to be acquired. And really only in the 100-year flood would you see the water get to that elevation. But it would really be the right thing to do, would be to gain the right to pond on. It would be a very minor easement though.
I assume this is common ground for the homeowners?
Yes, all of this property is their, the homeowner association common ground, yes. And that's the case in all of these. This is some details just to show you, we've worked out some of the details to some degree in the preliminary design. So we can always visit that. There'll be a report that you can look at in more detail if you want to spend time looking at things like that. So this is kind of a summary of what we just talked about. All the things that would be done to West Glen. We would be able to reduce small to large storms by about 25 to 30%. And so these are some of the performance numbers that we've looked at. It really reduces the water coming through there, but it is a smaller drainage area. So in the overall picture of things, it's a small incremental improvement that we can make by modifying this basin. Lots of numbers, but bottom line, about $250,000 for that. It also includes sediment removal and hauling, which is about $10,000 there. And there's anyway, included in that is the clay bentonite liner also would be.
Todd.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. While this is a small increment, it's closer to the start of the creek, correct? So
Yeah, everything that I'm recommending is in the upper half of Cox so that you can reap more benefits over the longest stretch of the
Yeah.
creek. If we go further north and do improvements there, that's great, but it only helps from that point north down to bottom, and that may not really reap you all that much benefit. So yes, generally the upper reaches, which is the southern half of the watershed. If you know what we often call the triple bend, Strecker and
behind
What-
Elegant Shop.
Clayton, yeah, Clayton. It's
Median.
Strecker. So that point coming south or to the upstream of that is generally where all of these are gonna fall. Copper Lakes is a couple basins there inside the red circle. This is on, now we've gone east. We're on the east side of Fox Creek watershed. Here's Old Chesterfield and over here. And so we looked at that. It's a little different. These are all unique. So there's two basins. They flow north. There's a larger watershed here. But we are fairly limited in what we can do there because there are some homes that are fairly low related to the pond. And so we have to be really careful. We're not ponding water up into some of the homes that are adjacent to the lake. So we looked at that, and so we have our surveys, and our watershed area is what the yellow is there. And so we are looking at on the south basin, it already has rock around it, which is pretty good. But basically how these function are, the outlet structures allow so much water to flow through that they're what I call a flow through basin. They don't ever really store much water, so they don't ever really do that much good. And so a couple things we would do is restrict some of these large holes in this outlet structure. We would create a notch about 6 inches lower to drop the permanent pool 6 inches. And now that gives us more flood storage. When it starts to rain, that's additional storage. And then by restricting it, we'd actually push the water higher. And so that is some of the changes we would make to increase that flood volume above the permanent pool, the flood volume. There would need to be some improvements to the overflow in this corridor right here, where it would overflow in this direction. And we just want to make sure that we wouldn't affect anyone, that we would keep all that within this easement here. So there would be some improvements along that corridor to convey overflow water if that ever occurred in a large event, and keep it within the storm system, which comes out over here. So that's what Copper Lakes looks like, the South Basin. The North Pond is different. It needs treatment around the perimeter. It does not have a rock treatment around the perimeter. It's got some kind of strange things here with posts and a pipe here that's some kind of a dead old utility line, gas line or something. There's a lot of problems there where the pipe comes in, needs to be cleaned up. And so there's a lot of stability issues there. And also, we'd be looking at a retaining wall along the north side there to keep water from getting up onto that property. Just because of the way the land is sloped. Right now, water would get up onto the property, and if we start increasing water surface, we just keep pushing it up and up and up into their property. So we would build a retaining wall there to keep that water off of their property. We could get more volume and have an overflow point here where we would add some capacity and drop it into a pipe that's right here. So that's the same thing here. We have a large outlet structure that we would partially block. We would drop the water surface by 6 inches. So there would be a slight change in the permanent pool, but it probably wouldn't be noticeable. This is what the plan would look like. And it's just got an edge treatment. It's got some improvements here where it overflows to the north. This is the south pond, back to the south pond. And then the north pond would have treatment around the perimeter with the wall at the north and an overflow structure there. Some improvements here where the pipe comes in. And there's some details which we won't look at that. And so this is the south pond and the north pond. They're different, but these are all the different things that I would recommend that we would do to those, including removing about 2 to 3 feet of sediment. That south pond has a lot of sediment in it, so there would be a lot of material come out of it. So this would reduce flows by 11 to 18%. We're adding 159 cubic feet of storage, which is an increase of about 135%. So a big increase in storage. And then we're passing the large storms by adding some inlets to collect those overflow large flows. And so those 2 ponds being modified are coming out at about $313,000. All of these are kind of in the 150 to 300 range on the cost. Harbors at Lake Chesterfield Retention Pond is right here, just upstream of the big Lake Chesterfield Lake. Just to give you perspective, the Copper Lakes ponds are right here. So these are both in the east half, the east branch of Cox Creek.
Do those ponds, Copper Lakes ponds flow into Lake Chesterfield?
Copper Lakes,
Ponds, do they flow?
yeah, they come in downstream of the lake. Show you. So Copper Lakes here and here, and there's a pipe that runs this way right here.
So it flows into the
This
creek.
part is right here, so they come together here on the Catholic cemetery. Exactly.
And that water goes into Lake Chesterfield?
No, Copper Lakes does not. It comes in just below the dam at Lake Chesterfield.
Okay, and then it just settles in there? Where's it go? Where's it flow to, the water?
Then it flows to the north. It goes under Highway 100 and it just keeps on going north up to that pin up there. And that's where the east branch and the west branch of Cox Creek all comes together at that pin, and then this continues north.
There's no creek or anything it runs in, just natural flow?
It's kind of it's a large ditch.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
there's a lot of water there, so there's a
Okay.
ditch. It's down in a ravine.
Okay.
It's hard to get to. I've been down there and
Alright.
it's not easy to get to.
And I'll be honest with you, the reason I'm asking, because I live on that south lake. I got a house on Copper Lakes.
Oh, okay.
So
Mhm.
it's in Ward 7.
What? Oh, okay. Okay, so this is the Lake Chesterfield Lake. It's a nice lake for the most part, looks very good. We do want to increase the volume and restrict the discharge again here and do some improvements. There is some erosion around the perimeter. Do some excavation along this area right here to increase the flood volume. So be some excavation above the normal pool, just kind of laying that slope back a little bit steeper to get a little bit more volume there. This is what the outlet structure looks like. Basically, there is very little flood storage occurring here. When the water comes in, the water starts to come up, and this is a pretty large structure. It spills over. It never really goes up more than a foot or two. You could have a 100-year flood here, and it's just going to keep spilling into the overflow, and it's just not going to pond very much. It doesn't provide much downstream benefit because it doesn't store very much flood water. It's kind of a pass-through basin. So the proposal here, again, would be to cut a 6-inch wide notch in this wall to lower the permanent pool a little bit. And when you lower the permanent pool, now you've increased the flood pool. So you have more flood volume available to reduce downstream flows. So that would be one thing that could be done. The area in red there could be excavated. It's pretty flat right now. So that could be excavated and get more flood volume up here. This area here has a lot of sediment accumulation. There could be some sediment removal in the upper reaches there and on the side, along with the slope adjustments on this side. So we could get some pretty good reduction in flows. There's several spots that need some additional edge treatments with the rock to prevent erosion. And so with the sediment removal, the erosion prevention, you would see some of this water quality improve with less algae. So there's a plan on that, something like that with some edge treatments and just some modifications there and some grading changes right in here. All that within the common area though, so there would not need to be any easements there. Yes.
Did we not 4 or 5 years ago have an issue with the main drag of,
That's not the main feature.
that's not the main, okay, that's what I wanted to ask,
This is the
okay,
pond just upstream of the main lake.
okay,
We're not-
okay.
At this
Thank
time,
you.
we're not proposing. We could do something there, but we were trying to kind of avoid it because of the leaking that has
Yeah,
been
it
in the main
continues.
lake.
Okay, thank you.
Anyway, this is kind of what I just explained. And so we reduced downstream flow rates by 10 to 20%. And that's what flows into Lake Chesterfield. Then, of course, there's more flow reduction from Lake Chesterfield. But it's all, again, part of the puzzle of trying to reduce flows ultimately in Cox Creek further downstream. That one comes in at about 227,000. And so we get some pretty good benefits from it. Now, the last one is a dry basin. This is the big walled basin that you have just to the south of here. It's right here.
Is this underground?
No,
It is, it's above ground. It has a fence around it, but it's vertical retaining walls. It's dry. It now has a lot of trees and stuff growing in it.
if you look
It's
behind the
big.
theater.
It's like a giant
That's why I thought it was
bathtub sort of,
underground.
but anyway, it's very effective. It's a newer basin, like all of your basins here in South and Town Center. This one and the two over on the east side, they're very effective. They're dry basins, but they're designed to the newer standards. But we could improve it some. All of the volume in that basin is not really being used. So I would restrict it even more. I would also clean out the trees because those roots with modular block retaining wall, they don't play well together. And if you start having root intrusion into the foundation of those retaining walls, they may not necessarily hold together very well. You may be having some big problems down the road. So I would recommend a full-blown clean out of sediment and trees out of the bottom of that basin to kind of restore it back to its original condition. That's really maintenance, but it's still something that you could do while you're in there restricting the flows and trying to improve flows. It's also important, I think, with the new development going in, which is kind of over here, to help reduce flows as to kind of counter the new development there, which is going to be adding some flow in the future, so. So yeah, here's the basin. Here we are up in the our building, lower, right here. So we're in this building and there's the basin and the new development is going in right here. And everything drains out this direction and flows that direction. And the other two orange areas there are the other two basins, but there's really not a whole lot that I could find that we could do to those to really make a lot of improvements. So I didn't have those included. There's what the basin looks like with, it actually, I think that has more growth in it now. Survey the watershed area. And so now this is what it looks like. This is the control structure. Top of it, that's about 13 feet square, I think, something like that. Pretty large structure. It could be restricted more. We could clean out the bottom and gain back a lot of volume that we've lost because of just sediment and the stuff that's accumulated. So that's and this is the big picture. You can see there it's pretty large. And it's got a lot of growth in it that's tree growth, woody growth, which is a little bit worrisome. So that's the recommendation for the Southwest Detention Basin here at Town Center. Downstream benefits, you can reduce flow rates by 50% and get additional couple feet of storage by pushing the water higher by restricting the outlet. And so that's kind of what we're looking at for this basin. Over compensation for the additional development there. So we talked about that. So this one's not as much. It's mostly excavation work on the soil and 185,000 on that. And so when we look at all four of these that I just talked about, this is kind of how they line up. These three include pond sediment removal. It's about 175,000 that's estimated when you add the cost of sediment removal in these four ponds. So it could be less, but I understand that's a high priority probably for these subdivisions to see some improvements to their lakes. So yeah, if you include it, you're knocking at $1 million on all four projects. This is kind of a summary, and there's a lot of numbers here, but this is an evaluation of the effectiveness. So you have the drainage area, how many acres drains into it. Of course, more acres that drains into it, the more effective it is overall. How much volume you have in cubic feet. What's the volume per acre? And these are probably a little too technical to try to explain, but these are metrics that I'm using to try to evaluate which is most effective. How much volume is being added? There's a total of 400,000 roughly cubic feet of volume being added by all of these. So that's not bad. Bottom line is you look at cost estimate, what's the dollar per cubic foot added? What's the dollar per volume added? There's not a huge difference there. They all come out fairly close. These two are a little better, it was a little higher. But that kind of gives some metrics on how effective that these are. So here's where I'm going with the recommendation. I'll try to wrap up here. Is Joe kind of asked me, okay, what would you recommend if we were to bite off a couple of these because of the amount of money you have to work with? You probably don't have $1 million to work with, he was suggesting. But what if we could bite off one or two of them? What I would recommend is what you have as far as how the watershed is set up. You have a west watershed branch, the west branch, and that is what we are in now. That is what Town Center and what Westmoreland are in are the west branch. And then you have the east branch, which goes through Lake Chesterfield. That's Copper Lakes, and that's Harbors. Because one of the effective ways of trying to reduce downstream flows is when you have two large subbasins to offset the peaks. In other words, try to make one peak sooner than the other so that the peaks don't line up and maximize the peaks, right? So we're kind of offset those peaks, and instead it comes up and it kind of flows flat and then it goes down instead of peaking more. So I would recommend, if you were going to pick two, either pick the two that are on the west side or the two that are on the east side and focus on that one and offset those peaks a little bit. To some degree, if you picked one in each side, they kind of offset the effectiveness because they're still lining up with each other. So my first thought is, going forward, if I was going to pick two, you can see they're all fairly equally effective, and cost effective, you might say. But if you picked Copper and Harbors and put those together, that would be the most effective, or West Glen and Town Center together would be the most effective because they're in the same branch. And so that would help offset those peaks a little bit.
What would your recommendation be?
Well, let me show you the last couple slides and we'll get there. So here's the illustration. This is kind of the watershed. Again, this gray line is the watershed for Cox Creek draining north. You can see the red is generally the west branch and the green here is generally the east branch. And it all comes together at the top. The little squiggly blue line at the top there is the Triple Bend. So this is the upper Cox Basin. This is where we're focusing our efforts. And if we do something up here, we see benefits all the way down. So that's what I would recommend, looking at it in pairs in that regard. Now, hold that in your back pocket. Look at one more thing that we talked about with Joe that he mentioned, and that is, what if we looked at, in addition to this, because these are incremental, and honestly, those 4 basins are not going to solve your problem, okay? But they're incremental improvements moving in the right direction. Another option that you have is to look at what areas do I have that are not currently detention basins. Those are retrofitting existing basins. But do I have some areas along my waterways where I could build some type of a regional detention basin? And actually, in this case, you could go from no volume or very little volume to a lot of volume in some of these areas. So this is a waterway that runs through here. West Glen is right up there, so you kind of get perspective on where you are. This is a waterway that comes here. There's a waterway here that's draining through here, but this is an area that's undeveloped. This is an undeveloped area because there's a waterway that flows here. That's West Glen. There's a waterway, as we looked at, it drains right into a waterway. There's an area there. And so these are all open areas where the water flows. They've been set back off of well-planned subdivisions that set back off of these waterways. But we could go into these areas and build dams and pond water up whenever there's a rainfall. And just imagine if you had a small dam here and here, and another one here, and a couple here, and a couple here. And when it rains, all of these are all filling up at the same time. And all that water that used to fly all the way up there to Cox Creek, west branch of Cox Creek, is now being held back and being released slowly. And you can see that this would really, really be effective in the overall watershed reduction, along with partnering with these other basins that we're retrofitting. It's all part of this puzzle. So this is the west branch, and there's a few more, but these are some that I looked at that could be very effective because they have access from the road, because they have the right topography, they have a large enough space that if you just built a berm or a wall across the waterway, that it could pond water for a period of time and then actually drain out over several hours and so forth. And so this is the west branch, a very preliminary look at what some regional detention basins might look like. On the east branch, this is the north end of Lake Chesterfield right here. Just barely see Lake Chesterfield. Copper Lake comes in right here. Lake Chesterfield comes in out here. This is I saw it was owned by the Catholic Diocese, and they do have a cemetery there, but there's a lot of space here that's in the floodplain that is not being used. So there's quite a bit of space there. And then there is some space up here. Here's the one that we're just looking at, but this area here, I believe is owned by St. Louis County, if I remember right. And so anyway, there's these two, and there's a few others on the East Branch that could be used for regional detention basins with some type of a structure installed in there to create some storage volume. Last slide. So here's the recommendations. Choose either of the two currently proposed retrofits. We looked at 4 or 4.5, if you want to call copper 1.5. Look at either two, pairing them the way I described, in either the West or the East Branch. Pursue the regional basins in that same branch, either the West or the East. So focus all your efforts. Let's say year 1, year 2, year 3. This is kind of your early approach. Focus on one side or the other to offset peaks. Where they come together, you would offset those peaks and have more downstream benefits. Pursue then come back after that's done and pursue the other branch and the other 2 proposed retrofits and get more of an overall holistic type of improvement. This would allow you to maximize your early improvements, and then this would be more like completing the overall plan as you're going forward, a few years down the road. And then pursue those regional basins on that branch, whichever it is, East or West. And I really believe I just did some real preliminary modeling is how I came up with this approach, but I need to get more detail, and I'll put it in the report when it comes out, how much total benefit you could get from implementing all 4 of these with those regional detention basins that I had showed you there. But I really believe, looking at the size of the watershed and the volume that you could get from those, which was on the order of 5 to 10 million cubic feet. Remember, these 4 basins we looked at, they had about 400,000 cubic feet of volume. These regional basins could give you 5 to 10 million cubic feet of additional volume. So that gives you an idea of how much more benefit you could get from the regional basins.
Can you explain what you'd have to do to the current land structure to make it a regional basis?
Yeah,
basin?
I will,
Excuse
let me wrap this slide up and then
Okay.
I will address that. It's a good question. So I believe the cumulative impact is significant towards slowing and stopping the progression of erosion in the Cox Creek channel with all of these in place. And this is probably $2 to $3 million worth of work. So you might be looking at 5 to 10 years down the road to actually accomplish all this. But in the big scheme of things, that's a pretty significant improvement over a fairly short period.
Do you have cost for that regional basins?
Usually, I did look at that and I'll addressing your question. I'll explain why the cost is what it is. Probably you would put in a berm or a wall, probably a couple of those at each of the regional basins, because here's the slope of those areas. And if you put in a 5 to 10 foot high berm, it's going to pond water up to here. Well, I still have more space up here. I could put another one here and pond water up here and have a 2-tier storage area in, say, 1,000 foot long common area. So that's what it would look like. And it would just be a berm or a wall, probably looking at $100,000 to $150,000 each to do something like that. So when you look at 5 to 10 of those regional basins, you'd be looking at $1 to $2 million probably to do all of them. And so those are really rough, just initial looks at what a cost might
Would
look
those
like.
basins- What would those basins be composed of? The existing
Right now, they're
Tree.
mostly just valleys with trees and stuff in them. They might have some erosion in the bottom, but for the most part, they would remain as is. But you
Okay.
would go in, that strip of land, maybe 30 to 50 feet wide, would go in and put in a berm. And
Okay,
you would go 300 feet up the hill and put in another berm, but in between, all of the trees and all of the land would remain as is. And these are all areas behind people's homes.
that's why I was
would
asking,
not
'cause-
propose to go in and strip out all those trees, because that's why they buy these homes.
okay,
Because of
You and
these
I are on the same
nature
page
areas, and it
then.
gives them buffer between them and the person across the way and so forth. My brother is in Baldwin. I'm staying with him this weekend, and that's exactly what they have. And it's like, I can't imagine recommending taking out everything behind his house, right?
But you don't need
Um,
firms would.
and no, there's,
With that.
that is overdoing it for sure.
We're just
You
trying to
don't
slow
need
down
to
the water
strip all the
flow.
land. And there's a lot of water quality and runoff benefits to those trees remaining. So I would want to keep as many trees as possible, but build impoundments to pond water in a tiered nature. That's my vision for what these 10 or so regional detention basins would
So
look
does that solve our problem with erosion?
I think that would be would provide a lot of benefit towards slowing it down and stopping. I don't think it's not instantly gonna heal the triple bends of the world where you've lost 100.
Yeah, but it'll have, like you said, a significant impact on the,
But I think it would have a significant impact in slowing it down.
so the
and
people
reducing how much water-
downstream will be happy, I guess, with.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
It will reduce, gravel load is a big problem.
Okay.
So you have those massive amounts of gravel moving down from decades of erosion. And it takes decades for all that gravel to move downstream. Partially, these things, now they'll have to be maintained. Somebody, unfortunately, Rick or somebody might get stuck with doing some maintenance on them. But they're gonna collect gravel as you have erosion. They're going to be traps to prevent you from having a lot of extra gravel being introduced into your creek. And the gravel piles up and then the water diverts around it and scours out the bank. And so there's a lot of mechanical things going on there that could be reduced and improved by introducing some impoundments like this in several locations. If I had to choose, I would choose the East Branch. And if it may not be a choice that everybody would be happy with, but I would choose the East Branch, the Lake Chesterfield Copper Lake side first. It's a little further upstream, so the offset would be more effective because it's a little further removed from the main channel. It comes together at Highway 100 right there downstream of Lake Chesterfield. So you would see benefits from that point all the way down. The West Branch comes in quite a ways further north. So if you work on the West Branch, you're only going to see benefits from where it hits the main channel all further down. So there's a longer reach that you would see benefits by doing work on the East Branch than on the West Branch. And I think the offset would be more effective. Now, all that to say, I think they're very close the way I would look at them. They're both pretty equivalent. But that if I'm looking for something to separate them, those are the things that would separate them a little bit in my mind that say, I think you'd have more effective improvements over the entirety of Cox Creek channel if you worked on the east
And
side.
I can tell you, living there, the residents do have a concern about those because there's a lot of sediment in them. And so you'd benefit probably more residents than you would on the west branch of it.
And I know there's factors here that you may run into that I may not be aware of, like cooperation level and so forth. But so if you didn't go this route and you went with the west side first, it's not the end of the world. It's still effective and still would be a good thing. But if I had to choose, and if you all had to choose, and you might have to with budget concerns or whatever, that's what I would recommend, at least making your best effort to try to go that route. Yes, sir.
So I have a question, not for you, but for the group here. I don't recall what ward this is in, but there's a gentleman, I think it's on Evergreen Forest
Five.
Court,
That's 4.
4?
Five.
No, it's 5.
It's five.
That's fine.
It's
Is that
5.
Yeah.
Where his patio is doing this, it's beginning to sink.
Well, it's already sunk.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would this, if we went with his recommendation, would that help address his issue?
No,
I know.
that
Okay.
side wouldn't, but, and I don't wanna, it's your guys' thing. I've had conversations with several of the folks on the watershed task force. Greg is on it and he is, whose house you're talking about. And, you know, we've studied this a lot and Mr. Wagner's done a great deal of work for us, as has the USGS. And one of the things that seems to be pretty unanimous among the task force members is doing one or the other of these things certainly helps, but it doesn't really do any, like, it doesn't actually do anything for us. Whereas if we were to, as we talked about in some of our other meetings, like allocate certain parts of, let's say, the reserve to fixing Hawks Creek, you know, it's gonna take a while to figure out, you know, how we're gonna do these extra retention basins, but it's very necessary. There's a little bit of a weirdness, if I remember right, Joe or Melanie or Rick, about the town center one, because somebody else owns it in some sort of weird tax thing. So there are issues, but the idea would be, you know, we have, Hawks Creek is one of 9 watersheds, so we have lots of other work to do. This is just kind of our main one that we've studied. So the idea would be, this becomes a proof of concept. MSD is starting to come in, so the project at the Burgers House as well as the one down in Wild Horse subdivision,
That's right here.
yep, is going to be.
It's upstream of what we're talking about here, so we don't. Yeah, sorry, guys.
So they're gonna be, MSD is taking care of those projects, but they're doing that on their own. That's with part of this money that sort of the city gets, but not exactly. And so, everybody I've spoken to, which is most of the members on the task force, is feels very strongly that we have an opportunity to do good work, have proof of concept in one watershed that we can, if we can do them all sort of relatively simultaneously, that gives us a chance to then actually study how it all works and then apply that to the other areas of town. Because one of the things we have to think about is more or less everything west of 109 won't qualify for any MSD money. That is just gonna be on us. And one of the other conversations that we've had, which I think isn't an incorrect one, is, you know, whether it's the triple meander or some of these other areas of concern that we have, at the end of the day, those are actually MSD problems more than they are city problems. Like, I don't want the triple meander to get punched through and knock out the bridge at Strecker Road. That would be certainly very bad. But it's, if we had a bunch of money laying around, I'd love to fix it. We don't. And so that falls under the, I think falls more under the control of some of those other entities that are having it. So this is something we can do as a city. This makes sense. These are, you know, city subdivision type areas. And if it works out well, we can then very easily apply that math to other places. There are places out in, you know, Ward 1 and Ward 6 where it gets a little bit more complicated, because that's all, there are no HOAs, so that's really all kind of private space. This, you know, we can make it. West Glen Farms happens to be my pot, so I can just tell you guys right now, you can start tomorrow. I don't care.
Wait a minute, we need to fix the guy who's fallen in. No,
That's right. MSD is doing that one. So that's,
no.
and that's sort of the frustrating thing that we've had, because, I mean, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, like, we spent a lot of time and energy trying to figure that out, and then MSD just sort of came in and we're like, no, we'll take care of it. And so what we don't want to do is spend a lot of time and resources figuring out things that somebody else is gonna step in at the end of the day and just be like, nah, we got it, don't worry about it.
And how are we gonna find out what MSD is actually gonna do? Are they sharing with us the information?
We're getting a much better idea. Rick had a graphic recently that showed the 4 immediate projects that they're going to fund with their new sales tax revenue. 2 are in Ward 5, 1 is up in Ward 3, Pine Creek, and there was another I can't remember. So we're getting a much better idea. And
Are you getting a timeline, Joe?
Rick,
Well, the initial projects that they have slated have timelines associated with them, yes, but they're not done next year. They're within the next, say, 5 to 6 years.
Okay.
So how is that gonna help Mr. Burke? I mean,
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
His is the Double check on it. but
There
it
is,
on the
I mean,
web.
there's still a place for stream bank stabilization projects here. If you have something that's an imminent problem, you petition the MSD or do it yourself or whatever,
Yeah.
but this isn't gonna say, oh, Triple Bend's about to go into the daycare, but this will fix it. I wouldn't say that. It might slow it down, it might stop it, hopefully, but you're still gonna have an issue there, and once the wound is opened, and this is the way I look at it, the creek is wounded, it's like a gash. When we strip off the protective banks, vegetation and so forth, and it starts cutting, it's hard to get it to stop. It has to be healed, but at some point, we have to stop the cutting and allow it to heal. And that kind of is what we're doing here, but that cut can continue to cut for some time. When I say some time, years or decades, before finally it's going to start to heal itself. So there could still be a place, and we've walked the creeks in the last few years and noted several places where, wow, if this bend keeps cutting, it's gonna become a problem for them or whatever. And those are probably places that you need to keep an eye on, and it might need to have that bandage put on it so that it can start to heal. So it's not, there's never one easy fix to these types of super complex urbanization of a watershed type of problems. They're multiple fixes, and we hit them in a lot of different ways, but there's still a reason for MSD to do some of these projects, so.
As far as what you're noticing here, for the additional creation of the basins, all in, if we did everything, we have
Somewhere between 2 and 3 is what I'm estimating, yeah. I mean, we just haven't dug into the costs on these regionals.
But if you were gonna do to what Joe's talking about back here, if you're gonna try to accurately measure the value of what it's gonna do and case study, so to speak, for the future, kind of like if you piecemeal it over the course of years, you're not really giving yourself an accurate way to judge how valuable it's actually working. You know what I mean? You're like putting tape on a leaf.
Yeah. And if you're talking about Bonholm or what's your other one on the west of 109? Fox Creek, or there's a couple there that are lesser developed. And you have some large estate areas that probably never will develop, but then you have some that will, I suppose. But this is a retrofit of a watershed that's 90% developed. Those, you have a different approach because you're hitting them early on. And what are some more preventative things I can do so that I don't ever have to get to this point? So to some degree, there's different strategies for different watersheds depending on where you're at in that development process.
Okay, so we have 2 different projects. We've been talking about this for 6, 7 years now.
Or about 15 if you want.
Yeah, more than that. We're talking about $1 million. I would recommend that we do both projects over the course of the next year to 2 years, if we have funding sources to do so. And then monitor it as you suggested and see what kind of success we have with those 2 things. Because as you said, if we put a Band-Aid here, water's going to move on down the road anyway. So looking at what you're saying, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't do it to both spots and spend the $1.5 million and get it done.
Yeah, and that was just purely if you all had $500,000 to work with, here's what I would do first. But I'm not saying the second one is a lot less important than the first. I was just trying to help you with budget. But yeah, if you have $1 million and you want to spend it on those 4 basins, I think that would be a good approach.
I'm gonna make a motion to do that, but.
So there's a lot of, I don't know what else to call it, but there's a lot of kind of like offshoots that Cox Creek will snake in and go around other houses, but it's not technically tied into what you're doing. So how will what you're doing, if you do it, affect those little offshoots that they'll run behind people's houses or whatever and causing problems? So how would that affect them?
If we look at the blue lines there, if you can see those, it's kind of like a tree, right? And I think what you're referring to are all these little branches off that tree. Those are tributaries or offshoots. And so if it's down, if one of those is downstream of one of these regional areas, because these regional areas are here and here and here and here and here and so forth, then they'll get benefits. But every tributary, it doesn't see a benefit. Every tributary doesn't necessarily have an opportunity to really get in there and do anything to it, because some of it is just people's backyards and you're limited there. You just can't really do much with that. But so yeah, there are places where it'd be awesome to go in and work on every tributary, but cost prohibitive and practicality, it's not necessarily even possible, but it's a good point. Everyone doesn't necessarily get benefit from this. The main focus is on the trunk line, is on the main channel of Cox Creek and trying to control that. Everything contributes to helping with that problem. Some of the tributaries will receive some side benefits too, if they happen to be in an area where some of these improvements are going to be. So yeah, that's a good thing to realize, that everyone doesn't necessarily get a benefit. It's a community-wide benefit. That's what improving Cox Creek is.
Mr. Chair, I forgot to ask one more question. I'm so sorry. Has there been any discussion about having any of these subdivisions contribute to the cost of doing these things?
Well, like mine has to pay to maintain the pond, even though we don't see it or have anything really to do with it. So the idea, my understanding would basically be, we would go in, retrofit it as necessary, and then it would still be up to the HOA to care for the pond, which is not an insignificant amount of money.
No, I know.
Yeah, I'm sorry, too many meetings. I thought this was 6:30, so I apologize for showing up late. You mentioned west of 109, which is where I live. There's Hamilton Carr, there's Tavern Creek, there's Fox, there's Bottom, a lot of watersheds. The disadvantage there is it's rural, but the advantage is that it's rural. And a lot of this, you don't need to store this for 6 weeks where it's going to kill all the trees. We need to store water for 2 or 3 hours and slow it down for the most part before it gets down to the lower end where it's really done tons of damage, particularly in Fox Creek, which is my watershed. I have said this many times that I think it'd be incredibly cost effective if we could find some landowners with otherwise, fallow pastures and areas, wild areas and so on and so forth that are along the mainstream of the stream bed. In my case, it's Deer Creek that feeds Cox Creek. And just say, hey, let us maneuver a little bit here and there. We can add acre feet of storage that visually will not impact you whatsoever. But when the flood comes and you have hundreds of feet of water this deep on your land, we'll make sure some of it is this deep and kind of triple the storage. And it really seems like a cheap way to do things. And then we do some stream bank stabilization and everybody wins. And I kept throwing this out. It's kind of has died on the vine, but I kind of backed out of participation on the watershed task force because I had a lot of other fish to fry and it wasn't going to come to my ward anyway. But I'm asking the question again, has the committee or have you, number one, is that is there a potentially workable solution there if we look for altruistic landowners? Have you looked at it? How much retention do we need to try to find? Can somebody answer some of that?
So, I mean, specifically, not exactly, but the idea would be like what the USGS said and what Mr. Wagner's saying is if we can increase the retention and detention, like you're saying, this should dramatically
Yeah,
reduce the flow. So,
and she, I mean, it'd be much less expensive.
right, so
But let me just, I'll throw this out there, then you keep discussing it, but
Well,
generally.
we don't need to discuss it here if it's been discussed in the other thing, but
I'll
I
keep
had
it
that.
really
question.
short,
Okay.
just because we have looked at it. Watersheds generally, if I was to start at the top of the watershed, they're generally shaped like this, bowl shaped. They start out steeper and they go flatter, and then you get down to the bottom, you have these big floodplain areas.
Mm,
And often that is a great approach to excavate out a field 2, 3, 4 feet and create massive amounts of storage in these large flat floodplains down here at the bottom.
or just berm it up so that you raise the water level, right? I mean, you could do that as well.
Could,
Yeah,
you could, yeah.
less disturbance of
Go
the,
further north, is it Wild Horse, right to
Yeah.
the north? So when we looked at Wild Horse, that was kind of the concept, was excavating out some of the floodplain down there to create these large storage areas. The reason that wasn't included here, I didn't talk about it, was because the thing is, if you do that, you benefit Wild Horse. And I'm trying to remember, is there even anything downstream of Wild Horse? Maybe a little bit down there before it goes into Bonham and into the Missouri River, but all of this up here doesn't benefit from that. So it has benefit to it, but I was trying to focus on the upper watershed. The slopes are steeper. You don't have big wide floodplains. It's more like damming up. That's more of the approach of a tiered dammed up approach. And then as you get down to the bottom, these wider floodplain flat areas, that is what you're describing. That's also.
sure, but they also, most of it has already got 3 acre minimums and there's a few people with larger areas and so forth. It's not gonna change as much, but they're having problems. I mean, people, their homes get flooded out and the stream bank is collapsing and so on and so
Yeah,
forth. And
that
so
could
I thought,
definitely be part of the solution.
yeah, it just seems like a very proactive way to spend a few bucks on.
You're talking about rural area.
Yes, I'm talking about the road,
Whereas this rural is strict.
no, I understand that. It was the opportunity to ask the question.
See, that's where I talk about Fox might have a totally different approach or a quite a bit different approach than what Cox might have. Because of that. And so, anyway, that's a good point, though. I mean, these are all just things that help us all kind of understand the nature of what we're dealing with here.
So for these 4 particular projects, which I think it's a great idea to proceed in kind of proof of concept. Not being an expert in this, some of these numbers, increasing the fluctuation during storm events 2 to 3 feet of normal pool. I assume that you guys have back calculated the tributaries that would not impact the dense residential areas that surround these particular.
You mean like backwater causing the water to back off? Yeah, there's quite a bit of fall up here, so when you raise the water surface a couple feet, it will back up, maybe up into the pipe that drains into it, but it's really not gonna affect anybody's property. But we do look at the inundation areas, we look at, we have great topographic information, we can say, what would the new inundation area look like if we raised the flood pool? And that's where we checked every one of these. There was only the one on West Glen where we inundated a little bit on someone's property and we were saying, we need to get an easement here. But all the others, we were able to keep it within the common areas.
So the aggregate effect would not negatively impact any of these residents.
No, they're really in that regard, they really all kind of act in isolation from each other, but yeah.
And so what is the direction that you looking for a motion tonight to post council?
Okay, you made a motion.
Didn't get a second.
I said to do all 4.
Right, but I'm saying, so if we do the motion to recommend X, then that goes to council.
But it's new money, right? I mean, we have to come up with $1 million and it would be reserved or something. Yeah.
Obviously, we just did budget cutbacks, budget, so we're gonna take out of the reserve or?
Mr. Chair, the 2026 budget capital improvements have $500,000 for watershed projects. And I'm becoming more and more confident we're going to see the $300,000 from MSD maybe not right at the start of the new year, but certainly thereafter, sometime maybe in that, in the first quarter.
So
beginning
we're
of
looking
second.
at taking a couple $100,000. That 300
That's the budget
separate
adjustment
projects
mid-year.
Already allocated from.
No, the ones that Rick was mentioning, and I described at least 2 or 3 of them, that's MSD spending the sales tax
So the
money.
300 is strictly.
Strictly ours.
So potentially, we could have $800,000 with what has been budgeted and what we would receive from the sales tax.
Right, so we're looking at basically taking a couple $100,000 out of reserve. Right?
Again, that's probably a great question for Mr. Lee.
Yes, that is what we got.
Okay.
Can I-
Yeah, do we have a second on that?
Oh, sorry.
Rick's got.
Or Rick?
Rick's got a comment.
No.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to mention, all these would require final design, so you've got to hire an engineer to do the final design plans, run that through MSD and look at a number of issues like easement acquisition or agreements with property owners, HOA. So there's a lot of work that has to be done before we get to construction. So your immediate concern, in my opinion, is to look at funding the engineering effort, the final design plans for whatever these projects are. We do have a sizable amount of money budgeted that could be done for that right now.
So I think we need a cost for that, so we know what our initial expenditure
Yeah,
is to
so-
get to the point that.
Can we amend the motion then to say that at this point, the motion is to move forward with the engineering proposals, design,
So that we can,
it's kind of hard to push the project forward when we don't even.
Yeah.
Engineering cost, that's million.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Actually, Mr. Wagner did provide an estimate for engineering services.
Each one of these are project cost estimates, not just construction. So we have in West Glen's case, there's a line for possible easement purchase. Here's a line for engineering, survey, design, inspection, modeling, geotech, et cetera. 18% of construction costs.
So the 9 cents.
And then a contingency and cost uncertainty of 20% has been added too. So I'm trying to be pretty conservative to give you an idea of what total cost would be to.
that's why I was moving forward with proposing.
So we got a motion on the floor then. Move forward. Do you want a second?
I'll second.
Got a second on the floor. Any further discussion on the motion?
What exactly is the motion?
The motion is that we move forward with all 4.
But we just said that we need to have the engineering costs.
The engineering's
It's in there.
included.
It's included.
Costs. Now, as far as timing goes, there's work that has to be done.
Yeah,
But let me add this too. I meant to say this and didn't. On these 4, I don't believe there would need to be any core permits. I would not think that a Corps of Engineers permit would be necessary, but they're all modifying detention basins that MSD would have to approve. I feel pretty confident that that would be doable. It just takes some time. Keep in mind the regional detention basins. Some of them would need to have core permits, but also some of those have FEMA floodplains in those areas. And a FEMA floodplain remapping effort would need to be, and I just want to point out, these would be fairly quick to do. Those regional basins, although I kind of recommended you work on those too, just keep in mind those, there's not any engineering that's been done. There's a long process of regulatory approvals that would have to be done.
those would
So
be,
just keep in mind that these are quicker, easier projects to get done than those regional detention.
the goal for my motion was to move forward with these 4 locations or 4 recommendations that you provided.
Yeah.
So that we can assess, while we're doing that assessment, then we can begin looking at your second recommendation, what the costs would be associated with using those spaces, what kind of work would have to be done in those spaces, all of those things. That's kind of, in my opinion, a phase 2 of multiple phases as we go through this. And that we could possibly do during next year's time frame to determine if we wanted to set aside funds in the 2027, 2028 year, et cetera, to do the longer range additional overflow locations, for lack of a better term.
Just for clarity, I do support the motion, but your proposal on the efficacy of these is based solely on these projects. It is not including or anticipating the regional basins, correct? The regional basins would enhance anything that.
Yeah, I mean, I would consider these are pretty close to ready to go. As opposed to the regional, that's a very conceptual look at
The
this point.
efficacy of these projects is solely on.
Yes.
Katie, I have a
Yes,
simpler motion,
Okay,
if that, I know Melanie's writing it over there.
yeah,
Tell me if this makes sense. Move that the Parks and Planning Committee recommend to the city council that staff be authorized to proceed with the development of the 4 priority retention detention basin retrofit projects, including preliminary design, cost refinement, and implementation planning. Further, the committee recommends that staff be directed to explore the potential use of applicable reserve funds to support these improvements, if necessary, and to evaluate opportunities for adding regional stormwater basins where feasible. Staff shall report back to the council with funding options, feasibility findings, and recommendations.
perfect. Thank you.
I'll email it to you.
Yes, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, my
That's an
concern is,
AI.
if feasible.
No, so like, it's more like if we go to approach somebody for an additional basin and they're just like, no, we don't want to do it, then that would not be a feasible project to go forward. We would just move it ahead with the other. This isn't saying we don't have the money or any of those things. This is saying like,
With what he was talking about with the extra basins,
I get that. I'm
That we
talking
don't
about
know
the
anything
motion.
about yet.
Is, that was,
so that's saying where the basins are feasible, so where you could put them.
okay, not funding, but basins.
Yeah, like the additional ones, so like the one over by Greg's house, that Todd marked out, those kind of like yellow spots. Those are the feasible locations for these additional basins. That's where we're looking at.
And we're not mentioning in the motion that we need additional funds.
So I mean, that's,
not yet.
we gotta know all the I mean, we know basically how much it's roughly gonna be. It'll be, $3 million.
I'm not making myself clear. So we have a budget,
Mhm.
okay? But what I heard you say was then that we would need additional funding if we could find it, basically.
No, to explore the reserve if it's necessary.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so like we,
Report back to the council.
yeah, so like,
on
you know,
what they find.
as Joe said, like we have $500,000 in the budget.
Mhm.
So if it's determined that to do these 4 things, it's gonna be $2 million, then Tom or whoever will come back and go, if you guys wanna do it this year, I know it's not gonna be this year, but if you guys wanna do it, you gotta take $1.5 million out of the reserve. And
Yeah.
that's the decision.
But we're just making a recommendation for the staff to explore it, like you're coming to do all this. It's gonna have to go to the council.
Right.
So-
But I heard something different as
Yeah.
far, 2 different phases of it, because I was hearing more the money than the actual project. Is what I was hearing.
Sure.
No, you don't need to rewrite the motion. Is that AI?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just, I mean,
It's-
basically, at the end of the day, it's, once again, we're not appropriating, we're literally just recommending that we move
So we
forward,
take a look at it.
putting it all together, bringing it.
So the recommendation to the council will be, basically, the Parks and Planning Committee thinks these four basins are good. And additionally, they should explore retrofitting additional or creating additional basins. And if necessary, tapping into the reserve if that's what it is. But then the council gets to determine whether we're actually going to do that.
I think you could leave the reserve side out of the motion. The motion is, let's start looking at this.
The only reason the reserve thing is in there is just so they can come back and go, this
This is
is,
more than budget.
yep, we've got $500,000 budgeted, then we're not trying to take $1.5 million out of something else.
and what about the regional?
That's part of.
That's all part of it.
That's all part of
It's
it.
all part of this.
Yeah,
Cause I think, as Katie said, this is gonna be over multiple years that this
Yeah.
goes on, so this is just
yeah,
philosophically, this is what we're doing.
yeah. If we don't do
You go
something,
with that, amending the motion to that?
sure.
All right, I'll,
Grant, sorry, Councilor Grant, are you good seconding that motion?
You'll have a problem with an easement because I won't, no, I'm kidding. I'll second it.
Since it's your ward, I'm voting.
Yeah, go away.
It's his house, he's.
All right, so we got a motion on the floor, we got a second. Any further discussion on the motion? I think we've had pretty extensive discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate the discussion.
Thank you.
All right. That takes us into item number 2, which is the strategic review and modernization of advisory bodies reporting to the committee. That was presented by Councilman Farmer, myself, Councilman Farmer, put together the write-up and presented that, so I have him to better to join us and
Sure.
we'd like to talk through what you put together and plan it to everybody, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the general concept is, and we're doing this admin.
Can I stand back there and talk during master plan meetings? It's hard to hear the microphone, so
Yeah.
thank you.
So we're Mr. Bly and I are trying to do some things in conjunction, so everybody's working on the same page. So one of the things that we've talked about is basically just looking at and assessing all of the different boards, and committees, and commissions, and all of our meetings and stuff that we have. And having the staff basically kind of just say, you know, here's the point of what it is, here's where it originated, here are the numbers. The other thing that we have to take into account now, which was not in place before, is our term limits are starting to kick in. So we have members where that's kicking in, we have volunteer members or committees where that's kicking in. So we're starting to kind of lose some brain power, so to speak, and some different things. And so it's just trying to assess, do we need all of these things? Are they necessary? Are they necessary to meet every month? Because it also theoretically would then free up the staff to do like their actual jobs instead of just making agendas and facilitating these meetings. So the general concept, and Tom messaged a little bit about it today. I know they kind of talked a little bit about this on the staff end, is to basically get some information back more or less next month, kind of breaks down these things, and then we can start to assess, especially when we go to do our calendar of events for our meetings and stuff for 2026, like with EDC, we talked about, is EDC gonna be every month, or is it gonna be every 2 months? Or with the watershed, it's currently technically scheduled every month, but we meet like 3 times a year. So it just kind of helps take pressure off of what's going on, and just helps give us all a better idea of, you know, what are the dollars and things are doing, because we've got a whole lot of committees with a whole lot of different things. And all of them are very important, but you know, we're not usually very good at saying, we don't really need this thing anymore. Let's put our expertise somewhere else. So it's trying to figure all that stuff out.
So you're suggesting that we remove committees?
Maybe the idea is to, just to prioritize them. So to bring up, you know, bring back the list to say, hey, this should stay as is, or this should stay, but instead of being every month, it should be every quarter, or pick one, like we can't get quorum, or, you know, in some of these cases, like, you know, whatever, people aren't always showing up. I know I've had a conversation with the mayor, and it's not always easy to get people to like, hey, I want to sign up to be on this committee. I had Colleen send me a list, not a list, but count them up. I think we've had like 20 people this year that have said they'd like to serve on something, and most of those were at the behest of either the mayor or Unity or somebody. So it's not like people are just super excited about, you know, hopping into civil service, unfortunately. But you know, it's understandable sometimes how that works. So it's not really, it may mean that we're eliminating committees, it may just mean that we're adjusting when we meet, or we may get a report back that says, hey, all of these things are functioning great, and you don't have to do that.
And what about sharing information? So is that part of this?
Sharing information between committees?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's the other thing, is like right now, you know, because we have, like, there are, I would say that there are like, you know, we have park and planning and admin, and there's sort of subcommittees underneath those. And so, you know, kind of right now, sometimes we're having like, we're doing dual work, or we're, one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. And so streamlining that in a little bit better way, where we're not getting, you know, pieces out of left field all of a sudden, or whatever it is super helpful. So that's one of the reasons Mike and I were having this conversation, because it doesn't work if you guys do it on your side, and then I'm like, no, I think we're good on my side of things on the admin side. So instead, we're just gonna do it as a collective group, and we're gonna try to do a couple of those things where, you know, all the members, a lot of times we're switching committees every couple years anyway, but like you guys have an understanding of what is going on here, where when we get to a council meeting, half the people are sometimes getting that information for the first time. So we're just trying to streamline.
Yeah, this will be real quick. I have thought this from the beginning. Maybe this is a structural issue in the following sense. There's a report in here. This is simplistic, but there's a report in here that the department took some time to write about golf carts, and all it says that status hasn't changed because we haven't gotten the letters back, but that takes some time for the department. There are lots of things like that that could just go on a list and put a refresh date. This is when it happened. This is when the last thing happened. This is when the next thing we expect it's gonna happen. Here's your report. And it would save the staff enormous time, because I see that as job one for this effort. And you guys probably do too. It wasn't explicitly stated, but we should sort of restructure our request to say, guys, tell us how we can make you more efficient and give you some human cycles back so that you can do your actual job instead of writing stupid reports about things that haven't changed. Is that kind of part of this?
Part of one of the things is to look at, like, even to look at the agenda as a whole and go, how much of this is repeating?
Yes,
every
yes,
month?
yes, yes, yeah,
And
yeah.
if it's, you know, if it is 80%, then then the conversation is, okay, do we take that 80% and we say, we're putting very fixed dates on these, like you said, or is it, hey, we don't, like, we're talking about the same thing over and over and over and over.
I think we talk about enough new stuff that a monthly meeting seems important, especially if I term out. I don't want anybody else to be able to meet quarterly. You know, I want to make them meet.
Not these meetings, all the answers.
No, I get it. That was just being silly, but
You have some committees, like in boards where there might be minimal agenda.
Yeah,
and so
they still have to meet.
Make more sense, but
yeah,
it's like meeting just to meet doesn't serve.
Right.
You get people that burn out. So
Yeah,
they
you
go to
know,
this
I mean,
meeting because
I know I'm like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Boonish love coming meetings and Melanie does too, but I would like for these guys to be able to, like, sometimes go.
Yeah, that's a great thing. And, you know,
Well, so it wouldn't be much different than, I can't remember the report name, but it's the one that they add in red, what is new to the developments. Is that what you're talking about?
well, I'm suggesting that that's effort in and of itself as well. And if there's nothing material to report, it could just be, you know, they could change the date on the list so we know they've looked at it, but we meet about the things that are important and we don't have to, you know, talk about, well, this hasn't changed.
Just put it in another committee. Just get rid of that third committee and just have two. Can't you do it that way?
Well, there's,
We can do whatever we want.
yeah,
I'd like to make a motion that we direct the staff to evaluate what issues or what meetings we have outside of this committee. How much time spent on them, whether we need to continue to have them or not, and that you report back with something to us by the 2nd or 3rd of December, so that when we have our December meeting, we can have a salient discussion, because right now, we're poking
That's the
it,
idea.
we don't know.
That's the- And I mean, there are some committees that are like made by charter, so
Yeah.
it's possible there's things there's nothing that we can do about. a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
mean,
those things.
this committee, admin and public
We
works
can
are by
change the
charter.
frequency of meetings.
Economic development is too, I
Yeah,
think.
and so there's,
You
yeah,
have to have it.
so the idea is, exactly, so Tom, I mean, I think I said, Tom's got it, there's real specific questions like, how much time in general are you guys spending on setting up a meeting that then, you know, we don't have a quorum or whatever it is, and so that time is wasted.
Wasted
along with
time.
Don't you think it's tough on the staff? They're supposed to come back and tell us what's not important, you know?
Yeah, that's.
That's
That's from
unfair to
their
them. We should decide ourselves what's important.
But that's from their perspective.
We have-
They gotta get.
I was requesting that we have something to work from at our next meeting, that we understand what flows out of this committee in additional subcommittees beneath it. How often do they meet? So that we can do a better analysis prior to our next meeting of what we need to keep, what can change its consistency.
Well, I
And,
bet Joe could just tell you that right now off the top of his head.
well, you just had another council member say that we need to decide that stuff. We shouldn't.
Just discuss.
Well, is it fair? It's fair. It's a fair thing to ask, I think, isn't it?
The only thing I was, and Ms. Dodwell addressed it in the motion, in the paperwork, it said December first. That's the Monday after Thanksgiving holiday.
Yeah,
So
uh-huh.
second or third is great.
Basically, when you guys are just.
Time that week. So we have it for a week before. No. Yeah.
Talk about it. I love that it's in motion.
Yeah, but like I said, I just saw that and I thought, oh, maybe the second would be a little better.
So are we trying to eliminate some of these meetings or
Maybe.
Maybe.
Unburden staff.
well, what are the meetings are we specifically talking about?
That's what we're gonna get from Joe and his team.
So for recommendation.
Okay, so you're good with that.
It's not important, it's where can we be more efficient?
Yeah.
Like, we have overlap, we have committees that might meet every month that don't need to meet every month, because you can have a meeting set every month, or meeting to meet, and then talking about. You can consolidate one quarter a meeting instead of meeting every month.
I go to 3 meetings a month, so that's
Thoughtful conversation.
3 meetings a month is not a burden on me. That's all I'm saying. I don't.
Yeah, Gene, I think we're trying to save all the documentation and the backdoor stuff, back office stuff that they have to do in order to have those meetings. That's my interpretation, is that?
Side of it is, I mean, I think Katie and Devin, probably, Jim, you were probably there too. When we were doing when we had 2 council meetings a month and 2 sets of all these other things, that was an intense amount of, like, I don't have a problem going to meetings if they're valuable to me, right? I don't, not that I do this, but I don't need to go to a meeting here that we haven't made any progress on the goal.
Yeah, right.
That's needed.
Right.
What?
Uh-huh.
Right.
That's the biggest thing, meeting to meet doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't include anybody. The purpose of a meeting should be to conduct business and move things forward. And if that's not happening, we don't need to all get together and find out, hey, we're still waiting on information, if we don't.
But we're just trying to vote here to allow the evaluation.
Bring the data back.
Yep.
and decide.
Yeah.
Let's get into that point.
So we got a motion on the floor, we got a second?
So can I ask a question?
Last
So
time, we got a motion.
I will
Let's
second
get
it if
we don't
nothing.
have discussion.
Okay.
So we got a second. by
Okay, sure.
Councilman Rand.
Yeah.
Okay, discussion motion. Councilman.
So what you just said, Joe, it just like triggered it in my head. We have one council meeting a month. And I don't know about everybody else, but that is a lot of information to cover, plus do your other committees. And I felt like, just personally, I was doing a much better job when we had 2 meetings a month for city council. Because you could spend more time digesting and looking, and if you needed to do some research, you had time to do it. But when you've got an agenda like this for 1 meeting a month, I think it's a little difficult, and I personally don't feel like I'm doing a job that I was elected to do, because I don't really have time to dive into all the information once a month.
This evaluation could create 4 meetings a month. I mean, it could create more. It's not, the goal is not to reduce meetings. It's.
I'm just saying, no,
We could have a meeting every day.
That's
Well,
not the.
and the other side, I mean, we have, like, there are things.
Let's go for that, man.
There's, you're.
You are not allowed to make
You're not
any
in charge.
comments.
And like, one of the things that is helped to kind of spur this idea along is when we made the decision to go from 2 meetings to 1 meeting, there was a reason to do it, and many of us voted to do that. And so that's where we're at. And so, but what we didn't then do is go back and look at how we do all of the other stuff to go, how does this trickle down in this direction and come back up? So in this way, if you are, in my opinion, if it comes back that we are having less meetings a month for our staff, then that buys them more time and us more time to prepare for the actual council meeting where we're having these decisions take place. The other side of that, which is more of a kind of mechanism of how, each of us, there are 3 chairs of different committees in here, run it, is our meetings is, for some meeting, like the first 30 minutes is just recapping whatever we talked about the last time, which is great for new people to get caught up, but is not always a necessary thing, because the staff is taking so much time to put it in the background, and okay, we did this, there's all these 70 pages, and now we've changed 2 sentences, so let's go, let's.
No,
go
I
through
agree
it.
with that.
So this is all kind of built to try to figure out how all of these processes should work together, including the agenda that we have at the council, because, you know, when I'm not opposed, I think having one meeting makes a lot of sense. I also think we wind up sometimes rushing through stuff because we're wasting time on something else.
But I also think that one, I was gonna say too, like, for the council meetings though as well, I mean, number one, a big portion of the agenda are set, things that are actually approving expenditures for the mayor to enter into this contract. I feel like the reason why we get frustrated in our council meetings, is because we're super inefficient at managing the agenda for this meeting and next meeting. For instance, the last meeting, we held that situation with the lot split for a whole nother month for absolutely no reason.
Yeah.
We knew 1,000% that nothing that they said or did was gonna change. And there was nothing the city would look at differently, but we pushed it another month. Guess what? We had an hour of public participation with safety, the same, exact same thing over again for absolutely no reason. It was
But there is a
one
reason.
percent. So, I mean, no,
That's how it works in the democracy.
No,
You gotta listen to the public, Michael.
exactly.
No, but you don't say the same thing.
No, we do.
Bro, when it makes no difference to the council.
You make them
It's like the
happy.
White Buffalo thing. We're gonna
They're
have
happy.
absolutely no information at the December meeting that we didn't have the November meeting. We know that 1,000%, but we pushed it another month. And those same people are gonna come back and say the same thing over again, and we're not gonna have anything different to review. So when we talk about having one meeting a month and when we should have two, because we don't have enough time, well, we do that to ourselves.
No, no.
Yeah.
No,
100%.
are you finished?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, but
How are you? Councilor Alford?
So do you run the risk if you, with various committees, if you go to every other month, that then you run the risk of possibly not being able to act on a particular piece of legislation on a timely basis?
So I mean, that's part of what will come back with this information. I don't really think so, because there's, if there is something like specific to the subcommittees, I don't know that there's anything, they can't really make a decision without us making a decision. So if there's something that is super urgent, like for instance, if we had a watershed thing, you know, Joe would call me, we go, hey guys, we're gonna have a meeting, everybody would either come, or if it's a situation where like, we have to make a decision about spending money right now, that board can't do that anyways. So then it just goes to the council or whatever, and we have an emergency meeting as we normally would. The real idea is like, if there's like I would say if there's an emerging issue, and I think Rick does a good job of this with like the public safety committee. We can, like, that's technically, I think, scheduled every 2 months now, but if there's nothing to do, then he sends out a message like way early saying, hey, we don't have this. But if there was some urgent thing, at the same time, he would go with this, safety commissioner and be like, hey, we're having a meeting next week, or whatever.
So I see two ways you could do this. One is, regardless of what the committee is, if you go to you could go to every other month. Or you could do it the way I think you just suggested, which is keep it on a monthly basis, but about a week ahead of time, decide whether or not you actually have the meeting and then cancel it so that everybody has enough time to understand that it's been canceled.
The premise of this though is for the department to go back and take a look at it, and bring us back some data that we can look at, and then we
Yeah.
can have this.
Then we can have this
Conversation
discussion.
you're saying makes sense, but we don't have the data to look at.
Right.
it.
Cause it may be that there's some, ad hoc something, whatever,
Yeah.
like, we don't need this anymore. Okay, great. If there's other things, like my assumption, I tend to celebrate Wildwood committee meetings, but like, I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, as we're getting closer to that, those people would love to be in there probably more than once, whatever it is. So like,
Right.
it's almost letting, instead of us setting this without having the information, like we get the information, and then if it's like, yeah, they're gonna do monthly meetings for Celebrate Wildwood for this 4-month period of time, the rest of the year, it's every day. months, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
No, I'm all for it. If you keep doing things the way you've always done it, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to do it the same way going forward.
And it might be different. It's not gonna be the same across the board. You might have one committee that needs four, maybe one that needs one.
Yeah.
Depending on what it is.
Yeah, I mean, with watershed, and because that seems to be the one that did this, like, there was a period of time where we were just waiting for the USGS study to come back. So-
Yeah,
And we
you didn't
didn't know
meet at all.
exactly when that was gonna come. So it's like, all right, well, when they tell us it's in, we'll have a meeting. Other than that, if we don't have the information, we don't have anything to talk about. So we don't have to do it. And like the chairs, I think, like, obviously, the chairs can kind of do that, maybe not the Parks and Planning, but the other chairs can do it. But I also think that there is a sort of, unnecessary pressure to the people that are on those committees to be like, well, I'm on it, I wanna go, and I wanna participate, and I wanna do these things, which is very good. But then they wind up getting burnt out because they're not. They don't.
They're not
actually do anything
productive.
when they're doing it, they're there. Like, I know, again, with the watershed thing, it's part of the reason I was here tonight, like. There are members that have been on there, myself included, for 7 years, and these guys are like, when are we digging a hole in the ground? I'm tired of talking about
Right.
it, and I'm tired of studying this. And I'm like, I get it. So, I kind of want to be able to let all of our other committees and commissions do that. And I do think that, there is a real thing that we haven't figured out as a city yet, which is this term limit thing, which is, it is kicking in now. So people that were on these committees a long time ago that have a great deal of knowledge and understand this stuff, they aren't able to serve. We don't get a huge number of new people wanting to serve on them. So if you have to have 16 people on a committee to make it happen, it's really hard to do. All those kinds of things. So I think just kind of looking at how they're all constructed and what they do, it's worth doing at least every couple of years.
But Joe, we had term limits in effect always. It just wasn't in the charter. It wasn't voted by the people. I mean, we've always had a rotation. It's not, I mean, they could go for what, Joe? How many, what was it? 8 years? And then they could sit out 2, and then they could come back.
Sit out 1 year.
Only sit out 1 term?
1 year.
Yeah, so we've always had a rotation.
And he's talking about the subcommittees and things more so than the council.
I feel like this.
But the council is on subcommittees sometimes.
So-
But can I say what I wanted to say?
Yeah, I was gonna call on you. Okay.
I'd stop talking. No, I am all about a civil servant and serving the people. So if the people come before council and say, please put this off for a month while we X, Y, and Z, then I think we should put it off for a month. It's not gonna change our decision or our vote, no. But we're there to serve the residents and they elect us. And if they want us to wait a month while they do whatever they feel like they need to do, there's no harm in us waiting a month. We're doing what our residents ask us to
Except you
do.
want to hear.
That's true, but the question would be, what if they then come back the next month and say, we want to wait another month?
Well, then we can say yes or no,
But the thing about.
depending on what, I mean, we're elected to represent them. It's not the other way around.
When we're tabling something where we have to operate within what purview of the council. So if what's before the council strictly to decide, does this meet code or not? And that's the only thing that we're supposed to analyze. And residents come and say, well, we think this might affect our indentures, or we might have X, Y, and Z. That has nothing to do with what the council has in front of it. And they say, we want you to wait while we go explore if 3-1 Atlas is a spaceship or a rock. We don't wait for that. Our only thing with that situation was to decide, does this, the zoning had already been changed. Does this lot split meet the code for the current zoning of that property? And the answer was yes. And so that was the only thing in front of us, so.
I
there's no
understand
reason-
that.
But so if they said, wait a month while we go have a meeting to talk about X, Y, and Z, that's irrelevant.
We
to the
didn't
council.
clearly articulate our purview to the residents. That's the message I
But
got.
we allowed them to dictate to us what we
Yeah.
would do, so we were.
Because we didn't articulate that, hey,
Yeah.
we're only here to.
Well, we
do this.
talked about it, said it, we just.
Yeah, Mike, you
we
said it.
Brought a different narrative to the table and we allowed them to dictate.
But-
their-
I agree with you, but I think we could have been stronger.
Like
Regardless, though.
the historical buildings,
Yeah.
we let we delayed that for a long time and listened to the residents. So we do delay things because we could have denied that demolition of that one building a long time ago, but people kept coming up saying, can you give us another month or two? We may have somebody interested in buying it. So we do delay.
And
I
it's,
mean,
it's we, the it's.
Just
we-
my example.
It's we the people. We're supposed to be doing government as the residents want us to do.
Point of order, yeah,
I know, we.
yeah.
The
You bring it
motion
up.
here, yeah, I apologize for allowing this to happen. The motion here is strictly to have the department analyze data, bring back a report in December to let us know what the different committees are doing and where we can potentially make some adjustments and
Perfect.
efficiency, and that's that. We got a motion on the floor. We have a second. Do you have a second?
We do have a second. We
Okay,
have,
all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you.
Can we put the decision on this off until the next meeting?
No.
You're not a resident, you're a council person.
No.
Next item on the agenda is the utility. EDP framework.
Very quickly, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown has been kind enough. He's scheduled a discussion at Board of Public Safety. That'll be the first week in December. So if you're interested, that's where the discussion will start in terms of responses to our request. Any questions?
All right.
Okay.
What month, Joe? What month?
Let's see, Joe. Last item on our planning matters is the recent development trends. Anybody have any questions?
Just one thing on that. Again, as you know, you authorized an imposition of a fee of $50 for each zoning authorization. Right now, we're at about $38,000 in collection. That was through October. We expect to hit about 1,000 authorizations this year. So we're going to be very close to that amount. We had estimated about $50,000 in revenue from the authorization process. So just wanted to kind of give you an update there.
That helps
Mr.
pay for
Galan,
the salaries.
I'm sorry,
That helps pay for staff salaries.
sure does. The next item is under
Yep.
parks, and that was another one Mr. Farmer did, if you.
Yeah,
remember.
I'm happy to, we can just go over that. This was basically, on a similar level. And we talked about this, I think, Mr. Lee brought this up, but it's more or less to put a adoption of a prioritization, that life cycle review framework for each thing that the committee would, recommend going forward. So more or less a scoring matrix to say, where does this fit in our strategic plan from a cost perspective, from a needs perspective, and just go through. And once again, the goal is to kind of standardize the process. So we're not just, I think, I'll use an example of something that we talked about for a while, was the hard court and the pickleball and all that. So that was something that came up, and originally came up because Councilman Flasher at the time was passionate about it and really wanted it. And there was a lot of good components to it, but we started talking about it and we went back and forth and went through all these different designs and everything that turned out and working out at over here in Town Center. But long story short, from a cost perspective, I think it was $400,000 to get paid. And was it really something within the strategic plan that kind of money should have been spent at that time? And maybe, I'm not saying it wasn't, but I'm saying if we have a specific matrix that we go by, every time we have something on the table that we're interested in, and we can go through and use the exact same analysis scoring matrix and say, this is what it goes here, this is what it means here, then everybody's on the same page, and then we can use that as a means to move things forward, push them to the side, table them for a later point, or whatever it is that we're gonna have. But it's just a more standardized process as opposed to just an emotional, I think we need this, or few people feel strongly about it, others maybe not so much. So once again, it's not to say that I use that as an example just because it's something that would have been a perfect deal to plug in, right? And then everyone can use that same scoring matrix and answer these questions to say what benefit, what community need and value, strategic goal does this represent, and then its cost, and all the different. And you can look at the survey results and use it as an easy way to look at something and say, hey, this falls really low on the scoring matrix, or this is really high. Let's push it forward. So that's really the just.
And again, where does the residents fit into that?
This is strictly for committee. So this ain't, it won't change when we have things on the agenda. I'll use the hardcore again, right? That was something that came up in committee and we started talking about it. And the department went through great lengths in getting different proposals, and looking at all these different things. We retooled it multiple different times. Then we talked about it for a year and a half. And then after all of that, we decided to move from community park to town center.
And I'm
then-
still not sure how that happened, but okay.
And then we were able, well, because the developer over here, which was originally the Greenberg development, right, that they were gonna start.
They
They
donated the
donated
property.
land for us. to
We
put here.
were renting the properties, not the same thing as donating the property.
For a dollar.
Yeah, but the moral of the story though is more so that we went through that entire process that took a lot of time with staff and we went a lot of time in conversations in committee. And we never really had the direction we were following. We were kind of just going by the cuff and, you know, the emotion of who wanted this, there and what. And if we would have had a more standardized way of looking at it, it might have scored really high where we said, we gotta get this done right away, let's put it at a high priority. Or we might have said, you know what, this is ranking at a 2 out of 10, we need to just table this and not talk about it or spend time working on it right now. Because along with our strategic planning initiatives and our budgetary concerns, this is not something we need to be spending our time. So I think not just in this committee, but this is going into other committees as well, where everybody across the different committees of the city are operating on the same matrix as far as looking at different things. And I think along with what Joe was presenting earlier with mitigating, you know, things that are overlapping and that kind of stuff, this type of scoring matrix can also help keep the agendas of the meetings that we are having more in line with what our strategic initiatives are and what the budgetary and goals of the city are. So we're not spending 3 hours in a committee meeting and an hour and a half of us talking about things that really are nowhere at the top of the list of things that we need to do.
But you don't know, I mean,
But that's what the scoring matrix. is.
honestly, the hardcore things came from the community, it came from residents, it wasn't just Mr. Flasher. Is that not true?
Yes, we had gotten a lot of.
For years.
I'm not saying it was just Mr. Flasher.
No, I know, but I'm
Driving
going somewhere with this, okay? So it came from the residents. If we have, I guess my thing is, I see this more as business versus government. That's what I see. That's my perspective. That's government's what I did for a long time. And it just seems to me like we're going more down a business path than we are staying with the government path.
Well,
And I mean, we have to have discussion. We can't just line it up and say, this is a number 2, so we're not gonna talk about this. Because it might be important to 1,000 people out
and
there.
it might be, but we have to also start looking at the fact that we're running thin on dollars.
But-
And moving forward. we're
So
gonna run
resident
thinner.
demand, resident feedback demand is a.
It's part of it,
criteria.
right? But I'm saying,
Yeah.
just because you have a handful.
He's
of
not
residents
suggesting
that
this
say,
in place of, it's in
doesn't mean we
addition
should
to.
spend 2 hours and 5 meetings pursuing, getting bids and proposals and everything, and we're gonna have to become more efficient with, and more like a business, honestly, as far as being able to manage our time and our city staff, because we waste so much of the city staff working and running around in circles on things that aren't really important. And just because some people might think they're important doesn't make them.
Sure it does.
No, it doesn't. We have to look at it to say, where does it meet on the strategic level of the city as a macro? Because just because 100 residents out of 35,000 think it's important, doesn't make it important. It's what is gonna best serve the city as a whole. And we have to start looking at it from that standpoint, because we're gonna go bankrupt.
I understand the money perspective, but the city of Wildwood was developed for a reason. And one of those was the residents are the ones who brought things forth. We work for the residents.
We do.
And I understand about the money, okay?
Yeah.
But to us, to have a matrix to go down and then we fill it out, doesn't mean we're gonna fill it out the same way that the residents
It's
would
a
fill it out.
prioritization matrix, so it means that if it scores low, it doesn't mean that we tell them, we're never gonna talk about it, it's a bad idea, we're done. It's just saying, it's a prioritization, so if something's a 10 and something's a 2, we're gonna focus our time and energy on the 10.
And who decides who it's a 10 and a 2?
That's what
makes
the
that
matrix
decision?
is for.
Exactly.
And that's what,
Exactly. And
that's,
not the residents.
Deb, that's
So-
what we've been doing as a council.
So can I say something here?
Yeah.
I have my hand up. So I think we're getting lost here in this discussion. A matrix is not infallible. It can be a tool that we can use to make the decisions as you mentioned. But that does not preclude the residents from coming in here and expressing their concerns. And who knows, as Councilmember McCutcheon mentioned, they may come to us with some information that we haven't considered or that isn't captured by the matrix. And we could still over override the results of the matrix.
It's a guidance matrix.
Yeah,
not
but
a
I think
decision.
there's safeguards in this process.
It's to guide our focus. and our
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, but you're not gonna change my mind. I think this is shortchanging the residents.
That's fine. All right. So. Do we need a motion on this, or is this just more of a?
I move that we use this kind of process in order to clearly understand what our priorities are as the Parks and Planning Department or committee.
And just so you guys know, the Admin Public Works Committee and the Capital Improvement Program are already using this matrix. The same.
I'm not sure about administration, public works, but as you know, we have that matrix that we cycled all of the capital improvement projects through in advance of the budget discussion.
Yep.
So that's available. I assume we'll use that or some version of it.
Yeah,
as
Alliance. Okay, so you made a motion?
I made a motion.
So I'd like to second that. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Any abstention? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if you're not keeping track, we're past 7:30.
Yeah.
I think part of that is Mr. Wagner did a very thorough job.
Did.
I think it was important for him to do that. If we are going to use the matrix, probably the next couple of items can hold on. I would ask if you objections, we can postpone the next items and take them back up in December.
Okay. Fine.
So you don't have anything urgent, huh?
There's obviously the trash receptacle in the enclaves, that's obvious. We've already told them no, it's just asking us to reconsider. The others are more for informational, and the rec schedule, since we have the new approach, that we're supposed to use the life cycle evaluation template. I should do that before putting the schedule up for your consideration.
So you're suggesting that we could delay under Parks Matters items 1 through 8 until next month?
2 through 8. you just
Oh,
did
2
it
through 8,
tonight,
okay, all right.
2 through 8.
Is that motion required to that effect?
If you don't mind. please.
Okay, so I'll make that motion
Okay.
that we delay consideration on, okay, perfect.
And a motion to adjourn after.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? All right. We have no executive session. The only other matter was under other matters for consideration. And this is something that Councilmember Farmer and I were discussing and we're bringing to the committee. In light of the budgetary conversations that we've been having and significant adjustments that we've had to make to the budget, and knowing that moving forward, we're gonna have to continue to make considerations and capital reserves and do a lot of different things. One of the things that Wildwood prides itself on is parks. We have significant amount of parks, more so than any of our neighboring communities. And we've got fabulous parks, but the thing is with the parks is they're expensive to keep up, and we have to constantly be investing money. And we know just in some of the upkeep conversations we've had with bathrooms and other things that it gets very costly. And so the conversation piece around this was to say, putting an indefinite moratorium on building any new parks or adding more to parks we have as an investment, because that's just creating additional expenses that we're gonna have to address and move down the road versus being able to focus on maintaining the parks and the facilities that we have at the highest level moving forward, which we know is already gonna be a burden. Councilman Rath.
So I'm in general agreement with everything you've just said. One question I would have is, I know there was some discussion from some time back. Small, maybe it's not a small project dollar wise, but in the various parks where the restrooms are changing out the changing tables in the restrooms to something with a higher weight bearing capacity. Are we still planning on doing that?
Yeah, that would be part of the maintenance of a program.
Actually, Ms. Ripito and I have been working with Office of Community Development at St. Louis County. We have a bid out for it, and we're gonna use some of the funds we have from past years to fund those improvements to community
Community park to start with.
community park to start with, which is our most popular
Right.
park in terms of attendance and use. So we're using outside funds to basically move forward with that.
Perfect.
And there was also a consultant that came in and said what we needed to do to bring the parks up to ADA requirements and a few other things.
And so the idea would be with the support of Office of Community Development, each year we'll have a set of projects to upgrade and meet new ADA requirements and make them more universal in terms of their utilization.
That's outside of the scope of the moratorium.
What's that?
That's outside of the scope of this moratorium.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilmember Bluestein.
And you pulled, I know you were gonna use the matrix for the $100 project. Is that
Oh, the dedication.
the trail where you're gonna put the parking spaces and stuff, is that a part of it? Is that outside this?
This is the Ridge Road property that the Open Space Council is pursuing with a state grant and private donations. Yes. The direction from the city council was to basically plug that into the matrix and see how it scores relative to all the others.
So that could be outside of, it's already on the table.
Yeah, that's a dedication and a donation. It's not the city building.
I just wanted to be sure, because I mean, that's.
But what happens with this if somebody comes in and gives the city, I don't know, $1 million to construct a park?
Well, this doesn't take away
Then-
the council's ability to, this is just an indefinite moratorium that the council, like, we'll recommend this to the council and the council will have to approve it. But the council can lift the moratorium and any time they choose.
Yeah.
It's not going into the charter or changing. There's no like law being created that says we can't.
No.
It's just
It's just,
everyone agreeing that this is a path we're gonna take for the time being. But at any time in the future that the council chooses, it can lift the moratorium and build a park or some, whatever.
So
It's not
what's
to
the
say-
point of the moratorium?
It's just to say that moving forward, because we are trying to be fiscally proactive, that we're gonna take this off the table and develop new projects as opposed to taking care of parts of the area.
can I make a motion?
Yeah.
I'd like to move that the committee present to the council as a whole that a moratorium on any new park purchases and or implementations be placed on hold for a minimum of 5 years to be reviewed by council should an opportunity arise or should additional funding sources occur, then we can reevaluate it.
Second.
You have a motion and a second, any discussion?
Oh,
Sure.
okay, so that would affect.
Portner Park.
Moratorium on that.
Route 66.
Yeah.
Just.
Yep.
Okay. Just clarifying.
For the short, for near term.
I'm sorry, who was the second on that?
Councilor Robbins.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Any abstentions? All right. Well, that leaves us to our next meeting on Tuesday, December 16th.
My birthday. I'll have to bring a cake.
Any closing remarks?
Wish you all a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes,
You as well.
Thank
everybody.
you to the department for all the work you do.
Do we want to cancel that meeting in December?
What's that?
Do we want to cancel our December meeting?
No,
Is it Christmas?
Could we wait?
it's December 16th.
Okay, if you don't want to.
We've done that with council before.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll withdraw. I'll make a motion to adjourn though.
Yeah.
Joe, can I talk to you a minute about tomorrow?
Second, Councilor Hopper?
Yep.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Who opposed?
Thank you all.
That was a great meeting, it was a great
Yeah,
presentation. I learned a lot.
8 minutes late.
I didn't realize.
With all the discussion that we had.
We're gonna take it out of the December.
Actually, that's
Right.
cross cooperative groups in terms of.
Think I
others is a-
used to have my notebook and some stuff.
Yeah. I had something else.
Oh, perfect, thank you. Thanks.
Good night.
Steve's and I'll do.